Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Mental Health Association of Fauquier County's Lunch and Learn. We are so glad to have the people we have here today. We have Bruce Campbell, the chair of our Veterans Task Force. We have Debbie D'Alessandro from Spiritual Care Support Ministries. And we have Tonya Meunier. Is that right?
Close enough.
Who will be speaking about the unique needs of women veterans. We're going to start with Debbie, who's going to give an intro.
Yes, we've got the Veterans Task Force here, but I also wanted to introduce Tonya Meunier. That I went to the conference, the third conference, Women's Veterans Conference in Fairfax a while ago, and she and two other ladies were there talking about, and veterans talking about the special needs for women veterans. And I was really struck by what some of the things and challenges that they have come across. And also, even being a woman myself, but I was never a veteran, didn't understand that there's such a difference between a man and a woman veteran and the needs of those two. So I thought it would be great if we could leverage these ladies who have a wealth of knowledge to help us move forward in getting our women veterans the help that they need, and kind of put it in a collaboration with other businesses that we can leverage to help the lady veterans, women veterans. So I wanted to just introduce Tonya Menyer. She's the commander of the American Legion Post 284 in Colonial Heights, 11th District 3rd Vice Commander for the American Legion Department of Virginia, Vice Chair for the Eastern Region Women's Outreach Committee, and Vice Chair for the Conference and Convention Committee. And it's such a privilege to have you here, Tonya. Thank you so much for bringing yourself here to give us a demonstration or talk about some of the challenges and some of the things that are happening to move women veterans forward and getting the help that they need. So I'm going to hand it over to Tonya. Thank you, Tonya.
So when I was approached to come in and speak to you all, I was asked to just kind of come up with my own agenda. So I want to keep it brief. I've noticed that sometimes when moving into the community to educate our community partners and the average civilian, it's important to kind of keep it to the basics. So I'm going to try to keep my speaking time to about 15 minutes, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to ask questions as well. So I think you said it best, Debbie. What makes a woman veteran so unique versus her male comrades, the male veterans? And there's got to go back in history. So one thing I always like to remind folks is no female veteran has ever been drafted. They are all 100% volunteers to service to our country. And that is going back as early, and it's documented as the Revolutionary War. We have a lot of male veterans who through different conflicts have been veterans and served our country under the draft. We all know selective service, you all have to register by the time that, that you're 18. But no woman has ever been drafted for military service. Every single woman has been a volunteer. She has volunteered for her service to her country. And that's important to keep in mind, because when the VA system was originally created, and a little known history, the American Legion was instrumental upon return back in 1920 and trying to solicit our Congress for providing the healthcare needs of our war veterans that served overseas. And they came back, they had a lot of injuries, they were broken. So the American Legion got with Congress and said, hey, we need to do better about supporting these veterans. They were instrumental in creating things like the VA Medical Center that we now see today. Also, GI Bill and a couple other things along the way. So keeping that in mind, if you look at our VA system, when it was created, although we had women who volunteered to work in the nursing field, and we had them, and they were not considered military personnel until 76 years ago. So although they came to the call of service because they flew airplanes. Some of them were POWs, but weren't classified as such because technically they were not in military service at the time. It's important to understand those dynamics. Our WACs, when they first started, they didn't even get acknowledged as having been considered service women until 30 years after they had served this country. So it's important to keep those kind of historical moments in mind, especially when dealing with our older women veterans, because during their time of service, they weren't considered serving. And that's sad because they were doing the same things their male comrades are doing. They were flying planes. They were upon enemy fire. We have a lot of POWs still missing, MIAs from World War II. 28 women on the POW MIA list that we currently keep track of as a nation. And 17 of them are lost at the bottom of the ocean in one airplane. And these women were given the opportunity to return back to the United States. And they said, no, we're going to continue serving. And this is during World War II. And it's off of the coast of Africa. The Discovery Channel just did Uncharted with the Discovery Channel. Look, if you get a chance to look at the series, I encourage you to do so. It's very interesting. And they are all Army WACS personnel. And so the movie is, the series is Uncharted MIA Heroines, I think is the title of that particular series. Very interesting show. Just got the pleasure of seeing that back on September 19th at the Women's Army Museum at Fort Bragg Adams. So when you take that dynamics of history and you look at it, so that's part of what makes them unique is they've always had to battle for their right of being considered equal amongst their male comrades. And we're talking, you have what's called an S4. I'm going to use Army lingo because that's the branch of service I served in. But you have an S4 who handles all the paperwork for the command, right? And you have a male S4, you have a female S4. That female S4 had to work twice as hard to get the same recognition that that male S4 had to look at. And that's just processing paperwork. And you see that consistently across the job field. So some women get the bad impression of, oh, she's very harsh, she doesn't have a heart. Well, a lot of us women veterans aren't ones to kiss our children's owies. You kind of think of the husbands for the women there. You think of your husband, oh, you'll be all right, brush it off, slap a Band-Aid on it. You'll find that a lot of women veterans, because they've worked with men for so long, they tend to think a little more on that male aspect mentally and like, you know, suck it up, drive on and move forward. Because in basic training, the military, I don't care what branch of service you're in, the military indoctrinates you to drive on. You've got to have that drive on in order to supersede and move forward on the mission on hand, especially in a combat situation. So when we become civilians, that drive is still there, but people look at us as women and they think that, you know, we're going to be a ball of tears in the corner, kissing all the owies for our children. And we actually tend to handle a lot of crisis situations, much like our male comrades did. And so some people have misinformation on how we're actually feeling inside. We're very good, women and men, but we're very good at having that mask. You look at me, you think everything's okay. What I like to tell everybody is I am actually very much an introvert. But because of my drive to help my fellow veteran, I have no problems in speaking in a public space. But I am 100% service-connected veteran with PTSD. And I can tell you PTSD is the same as it is in the civilian sector. And that, you know, we have a lot of hidden things going on in our brains, and we have a lot of good days and we can have some bad days too. But so it's important to keep that in mind. The other things about the woman veteran is our health needs are different than our male comrades. For years, going back to the way the VA was created, you had more males that were getting VA services because they were the veterans. Even though women served, got injured, they were the veterans. So our health care has been male-centered for a long time, over 100 years. When the women started getting acknowledged 76 years ago as being veterans, serving in combat situations, and the first time we really saw Vietnam was one area, but it wasn't as many. We saw a stronger stance of women veterans serving during combat situations, albeit on the back lines, but you know, hey, military convoys got to go through the firing squad, and you know, look at Jessica Lynch. She was supposed to be a backline staff person, and you know, she was one of our most famous women POWs of Iraqi freedom. So Desert Storm, Desert Shield, we had a lot of women come back that needed some assistance thanks to the burn pits. And so there's different uniqueness of a woman veteran versus the male veteran. 3/4 of our VA facilities nationwide do not have adequate health care needs for the woman veteran. So you take a veteran like myself, I'm 100% service connected. The only health insurance I have is the VA. But when I have to go for my yearly woman exams, there's only two. There isn't now, but there was up until 18 months ago at Richmond's VA Medical Center. There was only 2 exam rooms that were probably the size of your bathrooms here. And that's it, to do a women's exam, which women have to have every year, just like a male has to go and have his well check. We do primary care, and then just like for the men on the call, you know, your spouse, she goes for her woman checkup every year. You have a lot of women veterans in the state of Virginia. We have the 2nd largest woman veteran population in the country for the whole state. And at Richmond's VA Medical Center, there is over 6,000 women veterans that are patients at that VA Medical Center. And you have 2 small clinics with 1 nurse practitioner. When I started with Richmond VA 22 years ago, I have traumatic brain injury, and I was told that I had to go and have tubal ligation because the chance of having another pregnancy could cause secondary conditions to include 100% blindness because of the increased pressure on my brain. Okay, so I deal with hypertension on the brain, and that is a side effect of my traumatic brain injury. I lived in Nottoway County at the time, which was already an hour from Richmond, and I had to go all the way to Hampton's VA in order to have that surgery done as an outpatient surgery. And I had a 2.5-hour drive home post-op. And that was the only thing that was available to me 20 years ago. Since then, we have partnered, Richmond's partnered with VCU Medical Center, so then they could do community care has started. And that has allowed us the opportunity to be able to use healthcare services that they normally would send us 2.5 hours away for. The other thing that is important that I like to put out there is post-traumatic stress disorder. With PTSD, you have 2 versions when you're dealing with your veterans. I don't care if they're male or female. There's 2 versions. You have combat PTSD, and you have what's called MST PTSD. So PTSD, for those that are not mental health aware, post-traumatic stress disorder. And then you have what's called combat. So those are people who have served in a combat zone. And they have the dynamics of having to see and deal with things that the average American citizen will never see in their lifetime, ever. It will not even compare to a bad car accident they might have on the road, okay? Then you have what's called military sexual trauma. And then we classify that as MST. Even in our VA system, we're trying to do better about educating the staff members that are within the VA, okay? Believe it or not, there's a lot of people that don't understand that. MST does not only affect women veterans, it affects male veterans as well. And that is something that the community and also our military veteran services need to keep in mind. The reason that we see it more often in the women veteran versus the male veteran is because there are more women who are sexually assaulted, sexually harassed than there are the males. However, there is a male community to this element. So it's not something that is specific to a woman. Military sexual trauma is straight across the board. And what makes it unique versus a civilian sector is multifaceted, okay? So military sexual trauma can start as small as sexual harassment in the workplace, to go as far as rape and sexual assault. So you have the small to the, the large. Some of these cases that are military sexual trauma is considered a hearsay assignment, but it does not justify or defunct that whether or not that actually happened to the military person involved. A lot of times in the military, you have to keep certain things under wraps so that you don't look like a weak-minded person because, basic training, they drive all of us, whether we're male or female, to be the best we can be to survive a combat situation, okay? And part of that indoctrination or thought process is because we have to be the strongest of the strong. We're the citizens of the United States, the 1%ers who join the military and say, I have what it takes to be a soldier and I have what it takes to do my job for the service of our country. When we say that somebody has assaulted us, male or woman, that gives an inclination of a sign of weakness because you could not defend yourself. And if you can't do that with somebody of your own military rank structure, then you won't be able to do that in a combat situation. So it undermines the authority. Here's the other part of it, though. The other part is we are trained to have each other's six. You'll hear that term a lot when dealing with a veteran. I've got your six. I'm going to be here. Our jobs are to help each other come home to our families. Believe it or not, it's a big thing that we stress as veterans. And then now all of a sudden you have a veteran who has assaulted another veteran. And so you have that trust factor. Sometimes when you do snitch or storytell or spill the beans, whatever terminology the people you're dealing with wants to use, then you have the whiplash factor, as I like to call it, because you think you're going to do right to prevent that person from doing it again to another person, and you're going to be strong-minded and you're going to fight your way through it. But now all of a sudden you're the bad guy. You're the one that doesn't get the promotions. You're the one that doesn't see justice being served. You'll see that in our older cases of those who have whistleblown, as another term that's used commonly, the factors of an MST situation, the victim or the survivor, as I like to use the terminology of, tends to be the one that gets the negative reviews, the negative job reviews, the transfer from the unit to another unit. Their whole life kind of gets upheaved and moved around. And the assaulter, the person that did the crime, because that's what it is the one that it's kind of thrown under the rug. Nobody wants it to be heard about. Nobody wants it to be talked about. And they tend to not be criminally prosecuted either. They might get knocked down a couple of ranks every now and then they'll get thrown out. They're getting better about this. I have a daughter who is a 4th generation Army soldier, and she serves in the United States Army Reserves right here in Virginia. And I can see that her service in country as a woman is different than my service in country over 20 years ago as a woman. The mentality of our leaders, the ones that I served under, they're starting to retire. The ones that I served with are at the retirement age for military service. So you've got this younger generation. Some people like to use the term of woke. I don't really necessarily like that term. That's a little political term for me. More education on the dynamics of how that can affect the workplace is really come a long way. And you can see that they are doing a good job at trying to fix the problem. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a problem we're ever going to get away with. It's going to be prevalent in the military ranks. You have men and women working together in a close working environment. So it's important when those people come out of service, okay, that we do our job as a community, whether through community resources like yourselves, veteran organizations like mine, and educating them. It sucks that that happened to you, but we are here to help. And so understanding the basics on what MST is, the VA has excellent articles that I draw out of when I'm out speaking about MST that kind of really tell you the importance of the dynamics. And the biggest thing is trust, the trust. So it's going to take you a long time for those of you in the mental health, because I'm not sure what everybody's job is here. Those of you in mental health, it's going to take you a long time to earn that veteran's trust. But once you do, be patient. Once you do, they will start telling you what you need to know so that you can better support them. The other thing about women veterans that's unique to our male comrades is we are the family caregivers. Those of you, I'm sorry, Bruce, but you seem to be the only man on the call. So I'm not man bashing, I promise. But, you know, think of, are you married? I'm not sure, but, you know, a lot of times if you've ever been married, the woman does the housework, even if she's working, she does the housework, she fixes the supper. She gets to make sure the kids are taken care of. She tells you, Bruce, hey, I need you here, here, here for the children. So the women are the household managers, and they've been like that generationally for centuries, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes when we have to create appointments and you have your woman veteran call you up and say, hey, my kid is sick, I have to reschedule, don't get mad and don't hold that against her, because she's the caregiver. So she's gonna have to care for others before she cares for herself. And the key thing in dealing with these women veterans is reminding them to take that time out for themselves. I am famous for caring for everybody else but me. And I like to throw myself under the bus when I do these talks. And I have to be reminded very, very periodically. I do see a psychologist every 2 weeks, and she says, look now, Tonya, take a step back. And remember, you can't do anything for these veterans. You can't do anything for your children. You can't do anything for your grandchildren if you do not take the time to do for yourself. So that is something that took years of therapy for me to acknowledge and recognize. The other thing you want to keep in mind too is women veterans, when they get into the civilian sector, is they're very extremely lost, okay? A story that I told at the start, I like to share when I'm in public, is I'm doing housework, deep cleaning. It was a Sunday. Sundays seem to be my freer days these days. I had a fluorescent bulb that blew when I took the light fixture apart and clean, and I needed to run to Home Depot real fast. I pull into the veterans only parking, okay? And I park my car, I run into Home Depot, I go in there, grab the light bulb, I'm in the store maybe 5 minutes. I come back out, hop in my car. Now I'm in messy bun, no makeup. It's obvious I've been cleaning house all day. I've got my ripped capris on and I just look like a hobo, but I'm just a woman on a mission, right? Minding my business, and I get in my car and I hear somebody screaming, and I roll down my window. I'm looking around and there's this woman in the van parked next to me. And I roll my window down. I was like, is everything okay? Because, you know, it's like she's screaming and I couldn't really hear what she was saying. Do you not see that sign right there? And I look up and yeah, I saw that sign. Yes, ma'am. And she's like, well, how dare you park in that spot? I won't go into detail because it kind of rubbed me wrong and it was a bad day because I wasn't in the time for drama. And I pretty much told her, you know, look, I can't help it that I signed that contract to serve our country. But she essentially said that I did not look like any veteran she'd ever seen. And when a woman hears that, who has served her country proudly, and she hears that, it diminishes her service to country and the lack of acknowledgement that she would have to be a man to serve, or a little less fluffy. I have gotten a little fluffy, as I like to call it, but I've recovered from 23 major surgeries, 3 of which have confined me into a wheelchair for more than 6 months. And as we all know, the older we get, the harder it is to lose weight. That's for men and women. And then on top of that, I have metal holding both my legs together. So I can't go hit the gym and run track. So, you know, this is my new body type. It is what it is. So I embrace it now because, you know, this is just the way life's going to be for me going forward. But at the same time, to be insulted at such a level. There's other instances. I know veterans who have gone to the VA Medical Center. We had a veteran, a female, went for a colonoscopy, okay? Happened to be her time of the month. And you've heard this story at the conference because we told this at the conference. Happened to be your time of the month. And she says, look, I didn't know, you know, and they were like, oh, well, you're on your menses. And she's like, absolutely, I am. And they were like, well, what kind of feminine product are you using? And she's, I have a tampon. Well, you have to have, we can't do the surgery. And they were like, why? And they were like, well, because you're on your menses. She's like, well, if you give me a pad, I'll gladly change and switch over to a pad so I can have she was having a colonoscopy done. Which in our minds, we were thinking, you know, what difference does it make? It's a messy process. So why are they worried about it? You know, but you know, so, and she was told, this is a man's hospital. We don't provide any services. And women have been part of the VA for 76 years, 76 years. And she's told, and this just happened last fall in 2023. So it's like, and it was a female nurse that told her this. It was a woman nurse. So, you know, we hear about it. So our job in women's outreach is to say, yeah, no, that's not right. I've made a phone call to the women's coordinator for the VA for that particular hospital and said, hey, just want to let you know, this is what's going on. have another incident that involves me, went to the VA for an appointment and they had private security with COVID turning away visitors. And I was told, you know, we are not allowing visitors right now. I'm like, okay, so I'm just walking. And the security guard actually told me 3 times. On the third time, he actually stepped in front of me to prevent me from going into the hospital. For those of you that aren't familiar with the VA, all of our doctors are in one building. So our primary care doctors, occupational therapy, physical therapy, surgical clinics, inpatient care, all of our outpatient care, everything, dentists, the whole shebang, one building, okay? So this man stops me from going in and he says, I told you there's no visitors today. And I said, I heard you loud and clear, but if you would kindly step to the side so that I could attend my scheduled appointment, I would appreciate it. He said, I told you no visitors. I said, sir, women are veterans too, and I have an appointment I'd like to get to, and you're making me late. And I had to argue with this gentleman and push my way through the door just to make my appointment. So it's not even that we get this at the Home Depot parking veteran space. We also get it at our medical clinic. So it's important to understand that this is something that is still, and it's 2024, it should not be this prevalent in our society, these differences between a male veteran and a female veteran. When I talk to my male comrades, they're like, well, you're veterans like us. And I tell them, absolutely, we are veterans like you all. But until you have to deal with these dynamics, you don't understand why we push to say on our license plates, proud Army woman veteran, I have that on my plate. You'll see them wearing t-shirts that say DD214 alumni and different sayings, and because it kind of points out to them that we served. When I was dating my ex, we went to something, a Legion function, and they went to him thinking he was the veteran. And I'm like, this dude didn't even have family that served in the military, let alone himself. I'm the veteran. And this is back 11 years ago when I was brand new to the American Legion. So when we look at that, we need to make sure that we're doing better about educating that women are veterans too, okay? And maybe not be so discriminatory against them. Because when we get fluffy, there's usually a reason for that. So what can you guys do within your community board? So I've brushed on a couple of things. Key things is get up to date and current on the acronyms. Military service, acronyms are our thing, because our titles and our calls for the different things that we do, it's such a mouthful. Acronyms is what we go by, and we forget sometimes. So bear with us when we're speaking to our civilian friends and family and community providers that they may not be so familiar with said acronyms. The biggest ones that we see a shortage on is the MST version, and we're seeing that in the VAs and outside of the VAs. The other thing I want to let you know, specific for your area, for this county, for Warrenton, is knowing where the VA facilities are. So if there is something that you can't get this veteran through community care needs, you have West Virginia just over on the other side of Winchester. You've got that VA facility. There is a small one in Washington, D.C., and even closer is right there in Fredericksburg. They finally opened a satellite VA medical center in Fredericksburg. It is open and it is seeing patients, mental health and primary care. The other thing too is if you have volunteers, get with your local American Legion post. There's a service officer that can help these veterans with their claims. So a lot of times it takes on average 12 to 24 months for the VA to process a claim. That's down to people who have PVI, PTSD, the different resources. So get with the service and don't refer them to a lawyer. These are the veterans' money. This is not, and a lot of lawyers have specialized in VA claims, and they take a portion because they know it takes about 12 to 24 months. And those veterans get a nice chunk of money, right? And they get a percentage, which is a lot of money for that law firm. That's not fair to the veteran. They have gone 2 years of suffering, of wondering whether or not, how can I pay my light bill? How can I feed my children? How can I feed myself? Rent's due, and I can't work because I'm too disabled to work, but the VA has not come to a conclusion on how much money they're gonna pay me and my bills. And so service officers, DAV, it's not, and I like to be honest, okay? American Legion and the DAV are the two veteran organizations that are VA certified and accredited with their service officers. If they are not VA accredited, they're not truly a service officer. And the VA will not take that claim seriously, okay? So American Legion, if they happen to have a service officer in there that's helping with claims that isn't accredited, they know not to sign off on that paperwork, to push that paperwork to an accredited service officer within the American Legion ranks. DAV has a satellite office with paid employees at Salem's VA, which is who processes the claims for the state of Virginia. And they do have paid, but the local DAVs, those are volunteers like ourselves. So these people go through tons of hours of training and certification to know how a claim is processed and make sure they cross the T's and dot the I's to get the veteran what they need, okay? In the meantime, you have claims for PTSD because it's a mental health disorder. For those of you that are dealing with mental health, they can go on a temporary 100% rating. They can. I'm not saying they do, but they can. If they determine that veteran is dealing with a post-traumatic stress disorder or another major depression, anxiety, which kind of go hand in hand with PTSD, they're given 5 years of temporary 100%. But here's the kicker. That veteran gets 100% medical care, right? But their families do not.
Right.
The children and spouses of that veteran are not eligible for health care benefits under CHAMP VA. The only way that veteran can get health benefits for their spouses and their children is if they go under 100% permanent and total. And for any mental health diagnosis on a veteran, that takes 5 years. They have to go 5 years of showing the chances at doing improvements and satisfactory mental health services before they even have a chance to be before the board again to determine whether or not they are permanent and totally disabled. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do as a community board is push for that veteran, especially if their spouse is not working because they're taking care of the veteran, which is very commonplace, to apply for social services needs. Now, Medicaid won't approve them right off the bat, talking from personal experience, because that temporary 100% is the same as permanent total pay. Decent money. However, if the child happens to have a medical emergency and that supersedes their yearly income, they then qualify for the, because when they did the Obamacare, great concept, Obamacare, however, it kind of ruined people in those situations like our veterans under temporary 100%, and that now their veteran income is considered part of the income in order to base whether or not they are eligible for Medicaid. You see what I'm saying? For under the state system. So what that happens is they have to show medical expenses that supersede their income in order to qualify for the Medicaid. So, okay, so now we have a veteran who doesn't have those medical needs. What do we do? And that is the part that we have to talk to some of our community medical practices, maybe get some grants going in the communities and encourage them to have some kind of pediatric care for these children that are kind of stuck in the middle, because these veterans are getting paid over $3,000 a month for their self. And then they get if they're married with children, they get dependent pay for each spouse and child that they have in their care. So at one point when I had 2 dependent children under temporary 100% for myself, I made pretty good money. It was about $6,000, just under $6,000 a month, just in my VA benefits alone with dependent payouts. Then you had my Social Security add to it, and Obamacare plans for the children alone, because I didn't need health insurance, was going to run me $4,000 a month. $4,000 a month. You can't ask a veteran to pay half their salary when they still have families and kids, because a lot of times their spouses are not working because they're in such dire health needs, the spouse is staying home to care for them. So resources in the community to help offset that cost with the veteran, help them maybe with the monthly payments on that without penalizing them would be a great thing. And then the other thing is homelessness.
Yeah.
So that's a key thing that we're really pushing on women's outreach is homelessness. So Congress puts aside X amount of dollars, and I don't have the exact dollar amount, but it's a nice sum. They do a really good job at trying to focus on our homeless veterans as a whole. But the problem is there's more men than there are women. So these dollars go to our male veterans. The woman veteran will sit on that wait list for the VA facilities to house them 3 times longer than the male veteran. Because you can put the male veteran in these group homes and everything that they have set up for these male veterans. but you don't have a facility to guarantee the woman's safety if she's in that environment. Not only that, some of our women come with baggage, our children or our spouses. So it's important to keep in mind that we need to try to come together as a community to find resources. I know with our Women's Outreach Committee in the 20 and 4, which is the Honor Society of Women Legionnaires, we have been working with community resources to house these women in these temporary environments until their VA claims come through. It took 18 months for my VA claim to come through, from the time that they took me out of my law enforcement career and said, you can't work anymore, until the time that I got my VA payout, it was 18 months. And I had to wait 6 months for Social Security to kick in, and that still was not enough to pay all the bills in my household. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I'd move in with my mom. I didn't have a choice. I had 2 small children at the time, and I'd move in with my mother. And I was blessed enough to have that resource, but not all of our veterans are blessed enough to have that resource. So it might be something where you come together and help them with the hotel rooms, but those are the biggest things. Knowing that we lack in funding. I have had several talks with Congresswoman McClellan about this subject matter for our women that are homeless, and saying, hey, maybe you guys need to allocate that a certain percentage has to be spent on strictly the woman population. Not asking necessarily for more money, but money that's actually allocated specifically for the woman veteran to get some more facilities, albeit smaller ones. We're pretty resourceful and trying to network with our friends and everything. But you still have a group of women veterans that are longer on that wait list. And so that is something we're asking communities to look at a little bit stronger. And I think that pretty much concludes everything that I had on my short list. And so I'd like to take this opportunity for you all to ask me questions. Maybe I didn't touch on something you want to know more about. No subject is off limits for me. So any subject you want to ask, please feel free to do so. Any questions?
Hi, Tonya. This is Lori Medley, American Legion Culpeper. I know you, so in case you don't catch my name, how are you? I'm so glad you came, and thank you so much for everything you said. You did a great job. I really appreciate it. And even being a woman veteran myself, you taught me things and made me realize things about myself. And one thing that my daughters would probably really appreciate hearing is that thing about, living in a man's environment and not being the person that's really good at kissing boo-boos. And I have to recognize that in myself, but I hadn't really before. So thank you for that. And thank you for coming today.
Good to hear from you, Lori. I thought that was you when I saw the name. So, but I didn't want to make an assumption. I hate making assumptions. Anybody else have any questions?
If I can take the mic for a second here. I'm also VFW and Legion, and I'm the service officer in the Warrenton post, VFW post, and Lori is also a accredited service officer. I think you probably know that. I'm not seeing, the participation in the service organizations, either Legion or the VFW, to the extent that I think would be representative of our women military membership. And having more membership that would be proportional, perhaps, to their representation in the services, would seem to me to be very powerful for our organizations. Do you agree?
So
We are lacking in level of participation.
So
and is there something we can do about it?
So this is why the Women's Outreach Committee was created. When Dan Dillinger, you know who that is if you have access to the American Legion, when Dan Dillinger was national commander, he also saw that we have to do better about representing our women veteran community. And so he, as national commander, urged the departments to create women's outreach committees. And that is something that, of course, Dan's from Virginia, so Virginia got right on top of it. And we've had this committee for a number of years. It is a known fact that the woman veteran is not very well presented within our veteran organizations. we would like to make sure we do better at doing that. And that's why this committee was created. And the problem is you have, so this, without sounding like a misogyny kind of person, because that's not how I am. And Lori knows me well. She knows that I get along with men and women. So, but the important thing to know is that, you know, the people that I served under when I was in the service 20 years ago came from a different generation where a woman's place was home with the kids. And so, and before my time, it was even stronger, that mentality, okay? And these are the ones that have come before us and these veteran organizations, not just the Legion, but the VFW, DAV, all of the veteran organizations out there, to include the Wounded Warriors, you know. And so we have been working hard to change that mindset. You know, Virginia just had their first woman commander last year at department level. And Virginia's been around as a department for American Legion for over 100 years, since 1919. So we are working on it. And the point behind this committee is to work on it, to educate, to put the information out. What we need help with at the American Legion level and maybe even the VFW is when we're doing these community conferences that Debbie attended and listened, is making sure that we offer carpooling services and encourage these women veterans to come in. It's a pretty, we're trying to grow it. It's something that's new since I've came on the committee. It's something that I said we need to move around Virginia with. Let's make it happen. And we are working with a 20 and 4 whose sole purpose is women outreach, the honor society. So the 20 and 4 in Virginia and the American Legion Women's Outreach have combined forces, so to speak. So our goal is to move that knowledge of the women veteran needs around the state for several reasons. One, we need to educate our women veterans. We need to let them know what they're entitled to, because some of them don't even know. Number two, we need to educate our male veterans too, and let them know, hey, this is why we are supporting a woman veteran license plate, or this is why we do this. It's not because we think we're better than you. It's because we are not acknowledged in the same way that you are acknowledged for your time in service.
So as a follow-up, considering our 3-county collaboration that we have with this Veterans Task Force, there are specific recommendations that you would give for us at this level of community engagement that might, you know, promote additional participation, additional awareness in the community.
The biggest thing it would be is educate.
Our task force really covers a lot of different places.
So making sure you do some flyers, give us strategic people at your veteran organizations that are already currently helping, like your VA clinics, like the Fredericksburg Clinic, up there in, I'm drawing a blank, in
Martinsburg.
Thank you. Martinsburg's VA and DC's VA, if you have any veterans that happen to go that way. Veteran organizations, make sure, ask them, even if you have to pay a small amount towards, because remember our veteran organizations are all volunteer based. And ask them, hey, can I spend some, I want to sponsor something. Because one thing that's really important to know about the American Legion is the Be the One program is huge right now. Mm-hmm. We're pushing it. It's a great program. It gives better knowledge to our 22 veterans a day. And you can help sponsor some of these Be the One programs that they're trying to do in the community. And by doing that, you set up a table and you put it out there. Hey, we're here too. If you can't get into the VA, come see us. We have resources and this is what we have. Go to your council appointments, you know, the different council meetings that you have with your local politicians. Let them know that you're here and this is who you are and this is what you're doing. It gets the word out. You gotta be, and using the terminology and some of these acronyms, and Bruce, you can help with that because you're a veteran, you understand the acronym world. When the veteran sees the acronyms, they know you know what you're talking about. If all they see is military sexual trauma, they're gonna like, yeah, these people don't know what the hell they're talking about. And they're gonna walk away. And excuse my language on that, but that's exactly what, and I don't care if it's a man or a woman, it's exactly what their mentality is. If they see these clinical terminology and not the acronym terminology, they're not going to come to you for resources because they're gonna think you do not know what that veteran needs. And Bruce, you please, Lori, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been in many a room where they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to that person. They don't know a darn thing about military service. And we have to break that concept amongst our veterans. And the only way we're going to do that is by openly going to our meetings at our veteran organizations, pushing the information out there and making that happen, honestly. And sometimes you can get with your veteran organizations, your VFWs, your DAVs, your American Legions, and say to them, hey, can I come in as a guest speaker? We have this great program that we want to do, and I'd love to tell your post more about it. And so sometimes you have to take the initiative. Colonial Heights, you guys know, Lori and Bruce, huge posts, over 800 members at my post. That's just the Legion. We have the whole Legion family. There is no way me as the commander can take care of everything my post needs. Sometimes I need community members to come to me and say, hey, I'd love to tell you more about this. And I'm like, great, I need a guest speaker on such and such a date. You want to come? So it does work. So sometimes you have to take that initiative as the community provider. Hope that helps.
What's question about, you know, when the veteran comes back home, what resources do the family, do they have before that veteran comes back home? Because you know, they come back changed.
So that's actually an excellent question. So we still have soldiers, especially in our reserves and National Guard, being deployed right now. My daughter was in Qatar last year. She's a combat MP stationed at Fort Eustis. She's gotten a promotion, so she's not with this unit anymore. She's with a new unit now, but she's still a combat MP. And she was in a combat zone. People think we're not in combat zones right now. My daughter was getting her hazard duty pay in a combat zone, and she was in the Middle East for a year. What resources they have, because it's mostly reserves and National Guardsmen, mostly, not all, but mostly reserves and National Guardsmen, not much. You know, her reserve unit sent out an email every now and then to say, hey, how are y'all doing? And yeah, that was it. You know, if you need us, call us. There was no, one thing you have to remember too is with our reserve and National Guards, and we've got a lot in Virginia, a lot of units that are like that. If you can get with their chains of command and let them know that you're here to provide services, and then partner with the American Legion, who also has services specifically for reserve and National Guard members. The biggest things is transfer of pay. So when a reservist and National Guardsman gets activated, and I didn't realize how bad this was until my daughter deployed, is they actually went 60 days with no paycheck. Now they had their civilian jobs that they had to leave behind to go on this deployment, right? So thankfully, you know, it wasn't an issue for our family, but there were husbands and wives that were struggling to pay rent, waiting for that paycheck to come in when they got to active duty pay. And it took 60 days for that pay to come in. So we have to be community minded to provide support for those families and let them know, hey, we're here. If you need any assistance, we can help you with that. Because, you know, their pay is drastically decreased. Daycare is, you know, do I send my kids to daycare? You know, how can I afford this? While also worrying about their soldiers. So those resources are very limited. And we're working hard to try to strengthen the education on what other resources are available for them. But the Legion has a great program. I'll be glad to give you some information on that, that helps with that situation. As far as our active duty is concerned, they actually have a better resource. Each active duty military post has a return home program that's usually run by the Officers Club and the Spouses Club, and making sure that the families are taken care of. They do phone chains, and they do a pretty good job with our active duty military for return resources. But one thing that then they're doing better in our active duty for mental health awareness. However, the problem is your soldier is not going to go to that Army doctor. They're just not, because they're worried about their military career. They might be having some night terror problems. So again, allowing them to know that there's civilian resources that they can utilize that may or may not be billed against their TRICARE, because once TRICARE gets notification that they know they're seeing an outside doctor, it's a big, DOD pretty much has full control of that soldier. So just keep that in mind. You might extend it, but they may not still come. It might not be until they hit civilian sector for that change. That's something we're finding even with our Legion channels and everything we're doing with the American Legion. And that's because that soldier is going to be very concerned about that monthly paycheck. And some of them are so diehard in the military, they just don't want their career to end over a mental health issue. And that is a common thing that we're seeing.
Is there anything then that can prepare families? Because what we're seeing is, of course, a high divorce rate. The male or female comes back and they're a different person, and the family doesn't know, or the wife or husband doesn't know how to manage it. Or look for triggers or things in their personality that may say, okay, he's going to need, or she's going to need some additional help here.
Education. Educate those spouses.
Yeah.
What they need to understand is their soldier is not gonna come back and tell them what they saw.
Right.
They're just not.
Yeah.
You've got men and women who've been married for 50, 60 years, whose spouses served in Vietnam, and they still don't know the story.
Yeah. You
Okay,
never know.
and Vietnam was a lot of years ago. So, education to be, maybe, what I recommend when I've come across partner situations is family therapy. Not quite, and do not offer, so family therapist should be an individual that is not seeing either party in that on an individual. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Third party therapy. So the veteran is seeing their therapist, the spouse is seeing their therapist, and when they come together for family therapy, that needs to be somebody that is not seeing either party individually. It's
Yes.
very important to know that, because the veterans work on trust. And it's a level of trust that is very hard to explain as a veteran, okay? We work on trust. And if you're trying to point out where they're wrong, because, you know, and for those of you that don't know, I am 3 semesters away from my bachelor's in psychology, clinical behavioral health. So so I'm speaking on this, I'm speaking as somebody who's doing a lot of learning on this subject matter. So when you're dealing with a veteran with trust issues, and you say to them, when you raise your voice and you yell at me,
Yeah.
okay, and then the therapist says, well, you know, she has a valid point. And that therapist is the one that this wife sees. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Then he's like, well, you're attacking me, or she's like, you're attacking me, and you're gonna get nowhere in the therapy
Right.
process.
Yeah.
So, and vice versa, okay? You know, sometimes the spouse will get on the defensive, you just don't know. So when you're dealing with those dynamics to help that marriage, and if it's salvageable, you know,
Mhm. Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
it just isn't. To help them, if they're coming to you for therapy, the hope is that it be salvaged, right?
Mhm.
To make sure that it is a third party person doing the therapy. So you're gonna have to lean on yourselves to kind of coordinate that a little bit to help that family. The other thing is unfortunately, even in non-combat times, military service is rough. When you are married to a military spouse, you travel anywhere from every 2 to 3 years, you're in a new duty assignment. A lot of strain on those marriage. It's a lot of strain on the children in that marriage. And you figure average civilian who doesn't leave where they live, or they might move a couple blocks down the road, but their job is still in the same city, they still go to the same office, and they can build a career over 20 years, right?
Mhm.
When you're dealing with military families, the spouses aren't able to career build. They're doing better about allowing that, but teacher licenses do not go around the world. Medical licenses do not go around the
No.
world. Nursing licenses do not go around the world. They're working on improving that, but some states have not come on board with that. So you have to remember that you have a lot of different levels of dynamics within the marriage. And so even in non-combat time, divorce rates amongst our military are the highest than compared to any other civilian sector. And that's just a fact of military service. We all joke about Jody come a calling. And that's the military joke on that subject matter, but it's a fact of life. So, and unfortunately, some spouses can't handle deployment orders and they will leave just because their spouse is being deployed and they know they're gonna be stuck back. And that spouse will divorce, or they divorce them or separate while that person's still deployed and they get home and the house is empty. And she or he has run off with everything. And these are fact, you see it in the movies, that's a fact. That is a fact of military service, unfortunately.
Did anyone else have any questions? No. Okay, Tonya, thank you.
Oh, no, thank you
This
for
was
having
very
me.
informative.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time. And this lady does everything. It's all volunteer.
But Lori does, and so does Bruce. He's a service officer, so I know what kind of hours he keeps. I will not do service officer work. Lori and Bruce, you guys can have that. I will gladly direct in your direction.
Thank you so much,
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Tonya, for your coming here and sharing this information with us. This was excellent, and we can use it in our organization. And we do have it, I think you know it's been recorded, and we may, if we have your permission to do so, we may want to take some clips and use them at our meetings.
Absolutely.
Is
And
that all right?
I just happened to be the one that was able to make it in the calendar for today. We have a lot of people within the Women Outreach Committee that are doing these around the state and educating. And if you need us to come back to speak on any specific subject matter and more detail, we can. There's a lot to put out about the dynamic difference between men and women in the military service. So I just kind of picked a few things. I want to make sure I just kind of gave you general education. But we can dig deeper, like especially on MST, women, homeless women. There's a lot of subject matters we can definitely go into further detail on for further education if you want to know more about it. So we are a resource, use us. This is what we do.
One of the recent initiatives in our 5-county area is the establishment of a CVEB. It's the CVEB for Northern Rural Virginia, or Central Rural Virginia. It's just in the very beginning stage. They have they're gaining some officers, trying to staff positions and figure out priorities and the plan. And we're getting those that are involved are leveraging other CVEBs that are in adjacent regions of Virginia. But
Because we're doing the same thing in Central Virginia.
so I'm hopeful. I mean, especially as the the disparities and some of the anecdotes you provided that really mean that there need to be resource priorities or adjustments in terms of the women's mental health and other health within the VA. And I think we have a pretty good relationship on our Veterans Task Force with DVS. We have a DVS representative who participates in all our meetings. And so we're hoping that this entity will provide more leverage for a common, for additional input to our government leaders and perhaps sharing across other service organizations, to determine common sense of what the priorities should be.
Okay, Bruce, did you want to talk a little bit about the Veterans Task Force?
Well, I can, yeah, just for Tonya's background, if we were established as a VA initiative from their and we cover the 3 counties. We were formed in January of 2023 after the VA Martinsburg invited the various veteran services organizations and local health organizations to form a task force, for the purpose of collaborating to deal with the veteran suicide crisis. And we've been meeting monthly for the last almost 2 years. We have a very good, I'd say, representation from various healthcare, spiritual support ministries, and the local VFW and Legion posts. We've been leveraging the Be the One program, I think, pretty effectively. And so I think we're and then with trying to create education. We're distributing safety devices pertaining to gun safety. The VA's been good at furnishing us gun locks and lots of literature. We've been attending the various forums and conferences that are in our area to spread the word and always have a veteran presence at the booth Fauquier Mental Health has always been very open to having a couple of us veterans that are on the task force at their table. So I think that's pretty much describes our task force, and we're very happy. And of course, Debbie has been our lead on our women's initiative, recognizing that one of the, I think, 4 major components that the VA identifies as areas where targeted solutions are necessary is women's mental health, women veterans' mental health. And I'd just like to say, again, we're very grateful to PATH and to Fauquier Mental Health for hosting this today, and absolutely for your willingness to come here today, Tonya, and share with us.